Welcome to Healthcare Musings, a podcast dedicated to the discussion of critical care, the medical field, and healthcare in general. Here is your host, Dr. Hesham Hasabala. Hello, everyone. Happy to have you with me on Healthcare Musings, and I am delighted to. He's my first guest, actually, on the podcast. I'm super excited to have Mr. Matt Knox here with me. He is a healthcare CIO and a very prominent healthcare institution and organization in the United States. And I want him to kind of give us his perspective as a healthcare CIO on the whole phenomenon of cyber attacks in healthcare. I'm not sure if you know in the news here in Chicago. I'm based in Chicago. There was a major cyber attack on Lurie's Children's Hospital, which is one of the nation's best children's hospitals in the entire, in the United States, if not the world. And they were shut down for a very long time. A colleague, a friend, a neighbor of mine is a radiologist there, and they were writing reports by hand because everything was shut down, the EMR, the phone system, my chart, the communication with patients, and it's only recently that they're come back online. And then, of course, the biggest healthcare news with respect to cyber security is the attack on Change Healthcare, which is a subsidiary of United Health Group, and that they are like the middleman between claims processing and payments for hospitals, pharmacies, and individual medical practices. And that's still ongoing, even though some things are back online. And it's caused major disruptions, especially for small independent private practices, which don't have the resources to weather this kind of disruption for very long. So it is actually a pretty big deal. There's a lot of anger and consternation about it. And I just wanted Mr. Knox's experience and his commentary on kind of why this happens, what is the phenomenon from his perspective, and then what we can do about it, both on an individual and an institutional level. So welcome, Matt Knox. So happy to have you.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Hasabala. I didn't know I was going to be your first guest ever. So what a privilege, what an honor that you asked me to participate.
Oh my God, the honor is mine only. So I really appreciate you. I really appreciate your time to join us on the podcast. This is nice because normally it's just me talking for any number of minutes. So it's good to have somebody else who's much more experienced than me to kind of educate our audience about this issue. So let's get straight into it. I'm sure you're familiar with the whole attack on Change Healthcare. According to the Department of Health and Human Services, cyber health attacks have increased by more than 200% in recent years. And so kind of give me your sense as to the phenomenon on cyber attacks in healthcare.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is something that we have to worry about every single day. At the organization that I work for, we are constantly under attack. Literally thousands and thousands of times a day. We get probes, people trying to see if they can break into our system. And in addition to that, our employees get all kinds of tempting emails to evaluate and look at. And, with the whole goal that the hackers, or the bad actors, as we call them, are trying to gain access to our system, not for anybody's benefit but their own. So something that we have to deal with every single day, and we have a dedicated team underneath me who does an awesome job of fighting this battle every single day.
Wow! Thousands of times a day, really.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, if you add it all up over a period of time, it's millions of times a day, right? So, there are groups that are set up, often sponsored by nation states, other countries, if you will, with the whole goal of disrupting not just the healthcare system, but other industries within the United States, typically for financial gain. So they are, they're trying to get at our information and use that, in essence, as a a business, as a money-making enterprise.
Wow, wow. And is it? And I was going to say, is this really just about making money? It's just like these are just like gangs that sell drugs.
Well, I would say that's the typical thing, is to gain access to information that allows them to do a couple of things. Really, there's two primary motivations from a financial standpoint. One is to, as has happened at the Children's Hospital there in Chicago, to shut down basically the systems and cripple that organization such that they would pay a ransom. You may have heard of the term ransomware,
Hmm.
but to pay a ransom in order, to get the keys back to their systems, right? So the way that ransomware often works is that the hackers will put some malware, some bad software, if you will, into the environment, and they will encrypt the computers at the organization that they're attacking. And that organization doesn't have the ability to decrypt or unencrypt, and that basically makes their computers and their systems unusable. So to the extent that they need those systems to operate their business, which everybody does these days, um, um, they sometimes will pay a ransom to get the keys to be able to decrypt the systems and bring everything back online. So that's one of the primary goals, and those are the ones that tend to make the news. Is somebody paid a ransom, typically in cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, that's untraceable, in order to get their systems back up and running. The other thing that we see is that the hackers are after insurance information, policy numbers, things like that, in order to commit insurance fraud. So oftentimes when they steal, uh, patient data, patient records, the most valuable part of that is the insurance information on that record, and then they will file claims, um, that look like they are legitimate medical claims, and get paid from the insurance company, and that's how they get their financial gain. So those are sort of the two top financial reasons that we see for hackers to continue to uh, try to get into our data.
Oh wow. So it's mainly for financial gain and not necessarily just maliciousness and evil. Although you really have to be a special kind of horrible person to cripple a children's hospital. Where they have kids with cancer, kids with
Yeah,
life-threatening illness.
yeah, yeah. I think in some circumstances that's part of the motivation, but certainly, I think the financial factor is probably primary in many cases. You see other kinds of hacks out there against other sectors, utility companies, things like that, that are definitely about, sort of disrupting, um, economic activity, right? I mean, imagine if the power grid is hacked and there's brownouts and things like that. That's a different kind of hacking. Um, uh, but we don't necessarily see that so much in healthcare, although obviously the current issue at Change, um, although I don't know that it was a primary driver of that particular hack, it's certainly having ripple effect through the whole healthcare industry.
Wow. Is your organization affected by the hack at Change Healthcare? I
Well, I
didn't.
think, yeah, I think everybody is impacted either directly or indirectly with this. From our standpoint, I mean, we know, for instance, with Change that it's causing delays in processing um, prescription refills and things like that. But it's also impacting the ability of some medical groups to get paid for the services that they've rendered, and and that creates a financial, some financial pain for those folks as to, if the revenues are delayed, um, that causes an issue with the financial health of organizations. Fortunately for us, it's a minor issue at this point, but certainly it opens our eyes to, sort of how interdependent we are on the flow of data through the healthcare system.
Oh, wow. Well, how does how does it happen? I mean, like how can how can such critical part of the healthcare? I didn't even realize. Well, I know Change Healthcare through through Interqual as a physician advisor in my job, right? I
Mm-hmm.
know that they own Interqual, but I didn't realize that Change Healthcare was such a critical, for no pun intended, part of the healthcare payment processing system. And I mean, it like how could it? How does this happen? How can we be so How is it that we are so vulnerable to
Yeah.
attacks like this?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's two different things that we can explore there. There's, how did the hack actually occur? Conversation that we can have, but then also, are there these sort of central players in the healthcare system that, if they have issues, that there's big ripple effects. I think you're asking more about the latter at this point, but yeah, there are, um, in any industry, healthcare no exception, there are benefits to scale, right? So Change has built a business that has reach across the industry, and by operating at scale, they're able to actually um, you know uh, improve the economics of the healthcare system. If you're at scale, you can sort of drive down prices and costs and things like that. And because they have reach and scale, that actually makes them a partner that lots of organizations would like to work with, because they have a lot of connections. So they're sort of a clearinghouse, if you will, in many cases. And those clearinghouses, allow smaller medical groups, if you will, to be able to connect to lots of different partners through the clearinghouse. So it's
Mm,
not uncommon to have clearinghouses in any industry, and Change happens to be one that a lot of people rely on in healthcare.
wow. So I was kind of asking both. So how does a hack occur? Like how do these nefarious actors get access to? And is it exclusively physical computers, or can it be mobile devices as well? How do they do it?
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, what they're really after is where the data is, right? So they're after databases, they're after, large stores of information is really what they're after, because those are the valuable assets that they're trying to get access to.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of different ways, but I think that the two that we should talk about are um, via stealing user credentials,
Okay.
um, and also exploiting what we call vulnerabilities, which is basically software that has weaknesses in it that that the hackers can exploit. So on the first one, and we see, attempts at this all the time. I mean, literally every second of the day, we see folks, often through email, you know, sending what we call phishing messages with a PH, phishing. Um, and what they're really after is to try to trick somebody into um, uh, giving up their user ID and password. And once they have access to user ID and password, and most people have gone beyond user ID and password, and including another uh, kind of step, but the hackers are figuring out how to deal with that as well. We call that multi-factor authentication.
Okay.
So you may, like when you're logging into your bank or your credit card account or something like that, they'll often send you a text message with a code that you have to input, right? That's an example of multi-factor authentication. So you need your user ID, which is often your email, a password you've set up, and then this other factor, which often is a code in a text message. But they're trying to get access to all of those things to in essence, take over your account and in the shadows, see what you have access to. And if you have access to sensitive information, they may just outright steal that, or what their goal might be is more of a ransomware goal, where what they're going to do is they're going to see what they can get access to and then encrypt, in essence, to hold you ransom, right? You want to access that system, or you want that data back. You have to send me some money in order to get the keys to unencrypt what I just did. So that's that's sort of the thing that our end users are most subject to. The second area that they can get, second way that they can get into our systems is through these unpatched vulnerabilities, right? So software, unfortunately, by its very nature, often has bugs in it, or it has gaps in protection, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, so oftentimes you will, especially if you're on a corporate network with say a machine that is managed by your organization, you'll see, you need to reboot to install security patches. And really what that's about is that as software makers become aware of these bugs or gaps in their software, they will issue a patch in order to close that gap. And so this is something that that my team is constantly doing. We patch both the end user computers as well as our servers and other kinds of hardware on a weekly basis. We call it, the industry calls it Patch Tuesday. So typically on Tuesdays, major software vendors are releasing, that week's set of patches, and then we apply those patches to, the systems that we have. So if those systems remain unpatched, hackers can exploit that and do similar things to what they can do when they get somebody's credentials. They can gain access to the system. They can insert malware into the environment, and sort of depending on what their objectives are, that malware can either what we call exfiltrate data to the hacker directly, so gain access to data and sort of behind the scenes send that data off to the hacker, or they can be more brutal and just encrypt everything that they can get access to in the hopes that we'll pay them a ransom. So those are, I think those are the two sort of primary kinds of threats that you tend to read about. There's other kinds as well, but those are the ones that get the most publicity.
Yeah. So, and this has moved beyond the denial of service attacks, where they just kind of overwhelm the servers. This is more malicious, right?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up denial of service. That still happens from time to time. We actually had one against my organization, sort of a minor one recently.
Wow.
But those are, I think those have become less effective, right? So a denial of service attack is when the hacker bombards, your environment, and basically means that you can't access it externally. I think we have some pretty decent defenses against those things these days. It doesn't seem to be in favor right now with the hackers as an approach.
Yeah, I guess we've gotten good at them, and so now they're trying other things.
Yeah.
So where does the onus lie on is it on the software companies? Is it on the organizations to protect themselves? I mean, is there blame to go around? Is it users? I mean, like what what are your
Well,
thoughts?
well, the number one place to blame is these folks who are attacking us, right? That's
Of course.
but in terms of how we protect ourselves, there's we do it in layers, right? So, and one of the layers that is the most important is actually educating our people who use our applications about how to recognize when they're, you know, trying to be exploited, right?
Yeah.
Unusual behavior that they're seeing on their systems, or if they click on something in an email or on a website that they're on that sort of leads to a strange place or something like that, we want them to report that to us, right? We can shut down most um, even a successful hack, if you will. If we know about it, we can shut it down very quickly. It's the ones that are unreported that are the ones that turn out to be the most the most dangerous and spread the farthest within an organization. So it all starts with user education. As I say sometimes to my executives here, all it takes is one person clicking on one link that has malware associated with it. That's the level at which a successful hack can start. But we also have things like, we set up defenses on our perimeter, right? So things like how can we recognize these probes, these attacks? Where are they coming from? Are they coming from from a user who hasn't had that kind of behavior in the past, right? So even if somebody's credentials do get compromised and somebody tries to take over their account, if all of a sudden we see that user logging in from not their normal workplace, we get alerts associated with that. So there's lots of sort of user profiling that happens. And even more, I guess, direct, if you will, we block a lot of traffic that's trying to get to us through channels that are not normal, right? So when you access, say, from the internet, one of the applications that we use here, it's supposed to go through a sort of pre-specified spot in our firewall, and if we see traffic trying to get to that application through other parts of our firewall, we'll directly block it. It must be something that's not typical, and then we'll investigate as needed, especially if we have a user who's saying, "Hey, I can't access." So lots of different layers, if you will. It all starts with sort of user education, and unfortunately, having to teach those folks kind of what the typical, sort of vectors are at any point in time. We send a monthly, sort of education flyer, if you will, around security about different ways that hackers are approaching, trying to get into our environment, with the hopes that they'll recognize those things and report them if they see them.
Yeah, it seems that so this seems like a 24/7 operation, right? I mean, it's like it's nonstop. You can't let your guard down as an organization. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We have 24/7. We call a security operations center that is monitoring our environment, looking for these abnormal behaviors, looking for unusual patterns, things like that. And for the most, we one of the things we haven't talked about is what the role of AI is in this going forward. But we use AI in our security operations center really to evaluate, what our situation is, every second of every day. And it's great at identifying patterns that require our attention. So a lot of those can just be shut down automatically. A lot of attacks are shut down automatically. There's no way that our team has enough capacity to be able to address every possible intrusion. And so we rely on technology quite a bit to help fight against these folks trying to get into our environment.
Oh wow, wow, that's great to know, and it's still surprising that that these attacks continue to occur. I mean, I think that it was publicly reported that there was a payment of $22 million to a well-known hacker group. Everyone's mum about it, but everyone kind of connects the dots. From your perspective as a CIO, I mean, I understand on the one hand, especially if your system is literally the linchpin of whatever operation is being crippled.
Mm-hmm.
You want to pay their ransom, but that just encourages more attacks in the future. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, the interesting thing is that you're right. I've seen the same, press that you've seen, that it's, that they paid a $22 million ransom. I guarantee you that's the tip of the iceberg on how much this hack is going to cost them. They're
really?
oh yeah, they're going to have to, they say that the ransom and even the fines, they'll get investigated by the OCR as well.
Which is the OCR is the Office of what is the OCR?
It's the Office of Civil Rights. It's part of HHS. Okay. Yeah, and they're the folks that you have to report hacks to, and they come and they, evaluate, your situation and whether or not you need to remediate your environment. I mean, clearly these folks need to remediate their environment, and the cost of that remediation will be some multiple of the ransom that they had to pay. So,
and we rely on the goodwill, for lack of a better word, of these groups. Like, what if you pay the ransom and then they don't unencrypt your software?
Yeah, so it's that's sort of you can look at that two ways, right? If they don't unencrypt your software, then the next person they attack is less likely to pay the ransom, right? Because it won't benefit them to pay the ransom, right?
Yeah, makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, but at the same time, you don't want to pay the ransom because it's going to encourage them to continue. I mean, that they now have a successful business model, if you want to call it that.
Right.
And they're going to continue to do that. So, I guess, the proverbial double-edged sword.
Right. So then what are best practices, tips and tricks that you can share with me and the listeners about how to mitigate against this threat that literally is nonstop 24/7 threat? What should we do as on an individual and organizational level?
Yeah. So just reiterate some of the things that I said before. So, when you get that email from your security team that, contains sort of tips and tricks about how to recognize if somebody's trying to steal your credentials, pay attention to that, read that, remember that. And if you see that kind of activity, don't assume that that security team has your back in all circumstances. If you think you're being phished, report that phishing attempt to your security team, because if you're being phished and you recognize it, I guarantee you that other people are also being phished and they may not recognize it. And so if although we try to capture and eliminate those messages before they hit your inbox, we don't get every single one, but if you report it, we can go and we can clear that out of everybody else's inbox. So just understand that these folks are doing this constantly every day. You work in an industry that is a particular target right now because they've been successful in breaching these organizations. And if you get messages that either look too good to be true, hey, click on this link for your $50 Starbucks gift card, or if it's the if it's the CEO of the organization asking you to go buy gift cards at Target or whatever, it's probably not really the case, right? They try to prey on your emotions, hey, something free or something that somebody important is asking me to do.
Yeah.
That's what these hacker groups try to do. If it seems unusual, it you should think twice, and maybe get your security team to look at it to see if it's actually a legitimate request. So it also, from a listener standpoint, just be super careful, right? And we're starting to see these things come through text messages. Email is, I think, still the dominant area, but also social media is ripe with these situations. We certainly hope that people, when they're at work, are not spending a lot of time on social media, because social media is another vector where people click on lots of things, and as I said earlier, it just takes one person clicking on one thing to infect their own device, and once the hacker's into to your device, that gives them access to other things across the network. So just be really careful.
Wow. So even social media, because I have LinkedIn on my phone, and sometimes I'll check LinkedIn, or I'll post. I'm going to post this podcast on LinkedIn just to promote
Mm-hmm.
it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's another venue, really.
It is. And so, I think people who probably listen to your podcast trust you that you're
Yeah.
not, you're not, but if there's some other thing, it's more about, hey, click on this and, get the $10 off at Target or whatever. I mean,
Okay.
I would just be careful about those kinds of things. And if clicking on that link doesn't, directly lead you to where you thought it should lead you, you got to report it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So should we just not click links on an email anymore?
I think that you can click links from your colleagues that you trust. I think that, but yeah, I'd be careful with external. I think we, and just about everybody these days in the corporate world, you know, put special labels on emails that originate from outside of the organization. I would just be, extra cautious
Yeah.
when you see that external marking on an email.
Okay. Yeah. Now it makes sense. And now I feel a little bit better about the multi. Should we turn on multi-factor authentication for everything?
And I would turn on multi-factor authentication for any um, any financial website for sure.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, so your bank, your credit cards, your investment accounts, things like that. Sometimes they don't even give you a choice these days, right? They make sure that you have to have that second factor. Um, and anything else that you would be, disappointed if you lost it, right? Because what these folks would want to do, I mean, like even like, your pictures that you back up to, your Google Drive or your OneDrive or something like that, if
Okay.
those got encrypted, um, you would be disappointed about that, right? So like,
Yeah. No, it's true.
Google will allow you to put multi-factor authentication to, all of their services. I think it's a good idea to think about that.
Yeah. Well, it looks like I'm going to be going to my bank apps and turning on multi-factor authentication now
Yes,
after
you
this.
should. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Matt Knox, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. And this is such important information for everyone to take to heart. And let's hope that this phenomenon doesn't get worse. And I worry that it will. And I think just being extra careful, like you said, hopefully will protect us from truly disastrous consequences. So, Matt Knox, Chief Information Officer, thank you very much for your time today.
Dr. Hasabala, it was great to talk with you, and be safe out there.
You as well. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, goodbye.